Hello, welcome back. Congratulations, you are in section 6. In this section, we're going to learn about exception handling. Exceptions are situations where something bad is happening in the code, right? The program is going to error out. So you can handle exceptions or find the problem and fix it, right? So let's go ahead and create our new project for this section. We'll name it section 6 and we're going to create a new class. So right click on source. We're going to name it exceptions test, and obviously we have to create a package as well, com.java.tut.section 6. Let's go ahead and create the main method as well. Hit finish. So there are two major types of exceptions in Java. One is called checked exception, the other is unchecked exception. Let's learn about checked exceptions, right? So there is a class in Java that lets you read a file, right? Any flat file, a text file or something that you have locally. It's called a file reader. If you hit Control Space, Eclipse will import it for you. So we've seen packages and import statements before. So just like we've seen java.lang package, there is a java.io package that comes with Java, which happens to have a class called file reader. It says convenience class for reading character files, right? That's what this text says. So we can use file reader to read a file, but the goal of this exercise is not to read a file. We're trying to see or learn about checked exceptions. So let's go ahead and create a new object, file. There is a constructor for file reader, which would be new file reader, and it expects the name of the file, right? Let's just go ahead and say test.txt. We'll end with a semicolon. We have an error. Let's see what it says. It says unhandled exception, file not found exception. So what this means is for file reader, if you give a file name that doesn't exist, right, there is a chance that the program will fail, right? So file reader has been coded in such a way that file not found exception is a checked exception that can be thrown, so we cannot successfully compile this program until we somehow handle it, right? Because if we were to run this program where that test.txt doesn't exist, it's an error condition. The program would not know what to do. So there is a checked exception of file not found exception that we have to handle, right? How do we handle it? So obviously, when we give the file name and the program runs, that's when we would find out whether the file, exists or not. The program would find out, and it's going to error out. If you see the two options that are given here, there are add throws declaration and surround with try catch. We're going to learn this first. So if you go ahead and click it, I'm going to delete this to do code. So what's happening here? This is the statement that we tried, right? I mean, that we entered. There is a try added here. This is the try block, right? So anything that is entered in the try block, the program is going to try to execute, right? It's going to try to run that code. So that's the try block. And then we have a catch block. So the whole thing is called try catch block, right? So what we're telling Java is, hey, try to run this code. If you get an exception called file not found exception, catch it, right? Why would we catch it? So if we catch it or if we handle it this way, then the program can run whatever is in the catch block and still continue executing. For example, I can have a statement here, system.out.println done, right? So if I don't catch it or handle it, obviously I cannot execute it. But another thing is the program is going to error out there, right? Just fail right there. It cannot even proceed. But if I do a try catch and handle it, what Java is going to do is try to open the file, and let's say test.txt doesn't exist. It's going to come in here and then print the stack trace, but then continue executing. Let's go and run it to see how it behaves. So we'll right click and do a run as Java application. As you can see, we have a stack trace. This is what is called a stack trace. What happened here is it tried to run main, right? From there, we are calling file reader. So it went there, which is calling here, right? So it's a stack of methods, right, that tried to execute but could not execute because the file does not exist. So this is what called a stack trace error is, right? A program normally should not throw a stack trace error, right? Even if you handle it, it might be better to say something like system dot out dot println file test.txt could not be found, right? Let's go ahead and run it again. So now you have a graceful message, right, displayed. File test.txt could not be found, but then the program still continued executing, right? So that's the purpose of try catch blocks, right? Or how to handle the checked exceptions. You know the exceptions might happen, so you write code in the program to handle it, right? To basically handle the error, do whatever needs to be done, and then continue executing. That's basically a try catch block. One more thing to know is, since in Java we inherit all the classes and everything, right? File not found exception, if you open declaration, it extends IO exception, right? Now let's go and open this guy. It extends exception. Exception is the is a super class that many other classes extend. If we were to go to, let's go to a browser, go to Google, and then say Java 8 exception, right? It will take you to Oracle site where there is a Java API documented, and you have exception, which is the class here. And this shows the hierarchy of object is extended by throwable, and throwable is extended by exception. And then you have direct known subclasses, right? As you can see, there are several classes that extend exception, because exception is kind of like the superclass of all exceptions. Although there's throwable and object, exception is kind of understood as the superclass that all the exception classes inherit, right? So IO exception, for example, which we saw, extends this guy, extends exception. So if you go there, IO exception has a bunch of subclasses, which we saw file not found. So that's the exception hierarchy, right? So all these are checked exceptions. Now, going back here to the code, let's go to exceptions test. If you were to say, and then something like um, buffered, so this is another class to read the file. So let's say buffered reader, control space again, right? Reader equals new buffered reader of, we have to give the file reader. So that's the syntax. As you look through the API I shown here, right, for different classes, you would know what are the options available. I just happen to know the buffered reader one. So buffered reader has a constructor that needs an input of file, right, or file reader. So file, that's good. And then now we can say reader dot read line, which reads line, and then this is what I was expecting, but let's try to print it first. So what reader.readLine does is read a line, and then we're trying to display it. But what I was going to try to show is, now readLine has unhandled exception type IO exception. So just like how this one had file not found, this one has IO exception, right? We have to handle it somehow. So what you can do is catch IO exception, then say IOEX, and then say system.out.println or sysout control space cannot read file. So the reason we wanted to do it is because the catch can be stacked as well, right? You can add a bunch of catches, because you could have different code in the try block, right? Each of them could be throwing different exceptions, which means you need to have a bunch of catch blocks to catch them all. Now, one thing to remember is, since all these are classes and subclasses, right? You need to make sure the superclass is always at the end and not at the beginning, because we learned polymorphism, right, where a superclass variable can actually point to a subclass's object, right? Now, if you add, sorry about that. Now, if you add, let's go here and then say catch exception, right? You get error and says unreachable catch block. It is already handled by catch block for exception. And then here you also see unreachable catch block because exception is the ultimate superclass, right? So if an exception is thrown, any type of exception is thrown in this code, exception object or exception this reference can catch it. This variable can catch it, which makes this code meaningless, right? So this is key to remember. When you stack catch blocks, you need to make sure the superclass is always at the end, right? For example, IO exception was extended by file not found exception, which is why IO exception needs to be here. If you move this to the top, again, you would get an error. So that's definitely something important to remember. Your superclasses will always be at the bottom. You need to have the subclass exceptions first before you go to the superclass ones. So that's how you can add a bunch of catch blocks. So that's basically unchecked exception. I mean, checked exception. Sorry about that. We're gonna continue this in the next video, but hopefully that gave an idea of what checked exceptions are and how to do a try catch block. Um, Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.